This is the MIAA Weekly.
Welcome to week 10, at least I think that's what it is, John, of MIAA Weekly. With week 0, I've struggled with that one all year because the amount of games people have played has not necessarily matched up perfectly. So I love me some week 0, but John, that's kind of become a little bit of a hard thing to get right in my head. But how are you doing, buddy?
Not too bad. Yeah, it used to be easy. You just count teams 5 and 4. Hey, we're getting ready for week 10, but not as much anymore. But
as long as they can get a bye week, or in Pitt's case, maybe 2, that's a good thing. But
gives us a little bit more time to talk about other things this week with old Pitt on the bye again.
Right. Well, you know what? Let's kind of pull up here, buddy. What we had for results this last week, and as we look at them, one of those went into overtime. I'm not sure if I had that on my bingo card, but so some notable results. Let's put it that way. And still, somehow or other, you came out 4-1 in this deal.
I had faith in Fort Hays State. I don't know if I had that much faith in Fort Hays State. We'll get to that one a little later, but that one stands out. Boy, that Kearney Washburn game was a good one. There were some interesting ones, and then that one at the bottom is a little shocking as well. But absolutely, lots to discuss this week. We'll put it that way. We won't spoil it before we get into it here.
Well, let's go ahead if we can. And let's move on into our first spot here. Offensive Player of the Week. Talk to me a little bit about Mr. Watts.
I mean, you just saw that score they put up against Emporia State. They had a great game, and Shane had a great game running the ball, which is kind of what they had to do in that one. He was really good throughout the game. Ended up with, as I pull it up,
and I think he was over 200 yards, if I'm not mistaken.
250 yards, in fact. Yeesh. 250 yards. We got spoiled last week when we saw Jada Byers, but 250 is not a bad day with a couple touchdowns, adding in a catch for 14 more yards. Really good day when you can put up that many points and your quarterback only throws for 83 yards. So that tells you your running game was going pretty well. So very deserving for Shane Watts this week.
Well, they were perfectly okay with the rain and everything else. They just said we're going to run the football. But in addition to that, we have our defensive athlete of the week. Tell me a little bit about David Williams.
Yeah, David Williams, another obviously huge performance to get the win over Missouri Western, that overtime game you referenced there. But he had a good game with 11 tackles. I mean, forced a fumble. Really, really solid game. When their defense, it wasn't great all day against Missouri Western, right. But it was clutch when it had to be there at the end. So big performance from him, and a much needed win for the now MIAA leading Broncos. So
yeah, that's weird to say after that kind of game, but
it's weird.
Star guy here, who's I think gotten this more than one time this year.
I mean, he's got to, I don't know if the Elite 100 has a special teamer award, but he's got to be one of the leading candidates. Yeah, nice little 92-yard punt return that changed that game for them and gave them a touchdown. And I mean, Kobe, I like giving the special teamers their shout outs, but when he's also a very good defensive player in his own right, it makes him more deserving of getting a bunch of awards, in my opinion. And he's a good player and a really dynamic returner. So turn that game around. He's the reason they are the top team in the MIAA standings right now. So
I would agree. That was a massive play. We'll see it here in a little bit, but obviously the game that we're going to start with though is the team that we crowned number 1, and we were giving them their flowers last week and everything else that goes with it. And 37-13. I got to be really honest, John, in watching this game, By the time I got to the fourth quarter, I got the impression that the home team didn't want to be there anymore. And it was just that kind of game where they could not get Zabrowski and company to stop taking it to him. And it was just a tough one. And, one thing we've talked about, John, is the Gorillas' ability to throw the football. And in this case here, they weren't able to run the football very well. Mm-hmm. And Chad Dotson, 16 to 36, isn't going to cut it when the other team's putting up a bunch of points.
Yeah, we just saw that. That's the question we've had all year with Pitt State. We thought it might bite them against Central Oklahoma. Can they keep up with a high-powered offense? And they were able to do it against UCO, but against UCM, Zabrowski's kind of a different animal out there, and he's showing that, hey, we might have tuned him out a little bit when they got that third loss, but he's coming back with a vengeance in these last couple of weeks. Northwest and then Pitt knocking off the two perennial powers. I know Northwest isn't there right now, but having those two wins back to back on the road, the Mules aren't done. It doesn't look like.
Well, and one of our All-American Elite 100 players, Jack Barkley, linebacker for Pitt, was a late scratch, and I thought that really played into things quite a bit here. When you have a late scratch like that, there's no guarantee that the group who's replacing him is going to be fully ready and dialed in like they would need to be. And Zabrowski ran for 96 yards, and a lot of those were just that little quick draw he does. And a lot of that's just, them being able to, the backers to be able to go ahead and stay with him on those. He's a slippery runner. He's not overly athletic as a runner, and I'm sure he would say that, but he's a slippery runner. And he's got a certain savvy when he does it. And he really hurt, Pitt badly in times where they needed to move the chains and things of that sort in this game. And I really think that Zabrowski right here reasserted himself to the point where I think he's going to win the Harlan Hill award again. And, when you go ahead and you look at this kind of one of the guys who was catching up with him or really in the race with him, Jet Huff, he lost to Pitt. Zabrowski blows him away.
Yeah, and plus he got Coach Poe to notice him. The Harlan Hill doesn't do that, but
right. On our national show, Coach Poe finally realized
he learned Zach Zabrowski about the book of Zabrowski. So no, but what you were saying earlier about Barkley, I think of that linebacking core as such a good unit with him and Alex Gaskell and those guys. And when you take out the centerpiece of that matters. That's a big deal. And I'm not going to say he's necessarily 24 points of a big deal.
No.
He's that does matter when you take him out of it. But man, Zach Zabrowski seems like a guy on a mission right now, and I don't know if it's going to be enough to keep his season going past a couple more weeks, but he's going to try. It looks like.
Well, let's go ahead and we'll flip on the video. Enough of John and I talking, and we'll go ahead and also we got a post game interview with Zabrowski. So if we go ahead and I'm going to kind of pull this down, John, and play senior day here, obviously, and then if we take a look, the Mules here coming on out of the locker room. And I said it on our show, they just were in attack mode. Now, he gets picked early in this game, Zach does, but that was the only setback he had in this football game. Pitt stopped him early on a fourth down and, held them scoreless in the first quarter. Pitt scores a touchdown. I'm thinking, okay, Pitt's starting to assert themselves. And then a 24-point quarter by the Mules, and when they're hitting plays like this, and they were protecting the quarterback, that's not something you want to have. And this is a team that seemed to have kind of gotten some mojo back after, the adversity they had, in that first month of the season. And this 24-point quarter, when it was 24-10 at half, John, I was like, ooh, that's not good. Yeah. And Pitt's going to chase that number. trying to kick field goals, I got to be honest. And here's with all those runs we were just talking about. I mean, that's 15, 20 yards right there. And this is towards the end. And Pitt State kind of got frustrated with things and so forth. And, they get a penalty right here. And this was on the way to another, central score. And just, right at the end here, tight end goes up, kind of takes a shot. And that's the way that ball game went, buddy. And it was like Pitt never made the run in the second half. They scored one touchdown in the football game. They only got a field goal after half. And it was just kind of one of those games where that fourth quarter felt like an eternity for Pitt State fans. It really did.
Well, UCM all year has not had a running game, and we blamed it on Marcellus Hawkins being out, who's a really good player. LaAngelo Ball, 102 yards on the ground on 21 carries.
True freshman also.
With Zabrowski doing his thing, they put up 225 yards rushing against this Pitt defense. If they can do that changes things. Plus, a couple weeks ago, they got Michael Fitzgerald back, the big, tall receiver you saw there make the 62-yard catch. And with him back, that it just balances out the receiving core because Hospitals kind of inside can do a lot of different things. And then Patterson's a speed guy. It's just all of a sudden this offense, you gave Zabrowski his weapons back, and it's looking a little scary.
Well, they had some injuries at the O-line too.
Yeah.
And now that they're a little bit more healthy after that rough run they had, they're the team that no one wants to play right now.
Exactly.
And if this was a bigger playoff field, they'd be the team you don't want to draw in the first round. That's who they would be. But, in the current format we have, they're on the outside looking in. That's not going to stop them from trying to finish strong and see if 3 losses can still get you in. But, uphill climb like we've talked about. But here's Zach Zabrowski, the reigning Harlan Hill Award winner after the game. Let's go ahead and hear a little bit of this.
Not dead yet. We still got a chance to accomplish all our goals, and it was not that, if you're down and you got 3 losses, there's no better thing to beat the number 1 team in the country.
Just so incredibly proud of our guys, our coaching staff, the way they came out with a bunch of energy, enthusiasm, and executed, I think, at a really, really high level. That was by far the best game that we played all season, with offense, defense, and special teams complementing each other. And our guys just played together today. It was such a cool feeling on the sidelines, in the locker room, really the entire trip. I was so impressed by the connectivity of these guys and what they set their mind out to do. And, they had a mission today and came out, and I thought executed really, really well.
I heard a lot about the plays, and it was a fun environment, so I was just excited to come out here and play in front of a group of rowdy fans and play against a good football team. And I think we weren't playing like ourselves for a lot of the season, and the last 3 weeks, picking it up, and I think we had a lot of confidence, probably way more confidence than people thought we probably had coming into this game.
So, kind of an interesting take. It's I think that they probably had a little bit more energy and confidence, in the clubhouse than we thought.
I think they believe they can get in with 3 losses. I don't know if we believe that, but I think they do, and that's
because Coach Lambo does a good job of being convincing.
Yeah. He's you do a good job of being convincing the other way, though, Witt. But no, with the way they're sitting right now, you're right. You just beat the number 1 team in the country and did it convincingly. Last week when we had this conversation about Northwest had outgained UCM. I was like, I don't know. They had costly turnovers. It's like, I don't know if UCM's back. Right. That looks like a team that's back, and that's pretty scary. Unfortunately for them, I just don't know. They have a chance to make another statement this week, and then Missouri Southern to end the year hurts their strength of schedule. So I don't know if 3 losses is going to do it, but they're playing like a team that deserves a dance card, and that could make some noise if they maybe not deserves, maybe that's the wrong word, but could make some noise if they got that opportunity.
If they won out, I'm going to give them a 20% chance of getting in. Yeah. So in other words, I'm not saying they're eliminated.
Yeah.
But I just think they would need some help. And you know what? If you're UCM, that's all you can do You're chopping wood and see what happens.
Handle your business and root like heck for Henderson State. So
there you go. That's probably not a bad. And Indy drops a game and stuff like that. So yeah. Well, let's go ahead and kind of move along with what we have. And by the way, an interesting thing that we saw on the MIAA Barstool account, they went ahead and had this, which I thought was fairly entertaining. Now, in terms of modern pop culture, pro wrestling, this is WWE. I'm interested, does John Dykstra know who these two people are in the image here?
It's the Undertaker in the back, and I do not know which old school wrestlers in the front. My old college roommate Chris Schoonover, Bearcat grad, would be a little disappointed in me in that one.
But, yes, that is the Undertaker in the back. That's Mark Callis,
okay,
former collegiate basketball player, D3 down in Texas, and I think he went to Texas Wesleyan or something like that. Things I was expecting you to know. And that's AJ Styles, who is close to the camera here. This was a cinematic wrestling match they had at WrestleMania back probably about 5-6 years ago. Actually, it might have been during COVID because they couldn't have fans. But it was right around that time frame. I used to be an old wrestling mark, but this was kind of a big match. And I thought maybe this is something in Dykstra's wheelhouse, or maybe it's not.
It was for about 2 years while I was roommates with the guy who cared about it. But since then, I've fallen off a little bit. Although MIAA adjacent news, Baron Corbin, Tom Pestock is a free agent now. So
yes.
So there's some Bearcat MIAA nugget to throw into your pro wrestling.
I know who that is. Yes, but well, fair enough. Enough WWE for the show. I'm sure you will get roasted in the comments, John, for not knowing that. But that's nothing terribly new.
Undertaker was in perfect clarity back there.
Otherwise you would have gotten AJ Styles. I get it. Okay. Oh boy, a lot to unpack here.
I've said it for a couple weeks. Missouri Western's still playing hard.
Well, what our fan base wants to know is: are you still the driver on the fanboy bus for the Broncos, or is this something where you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out? Where are we at with your love fest with this team?
You mean the number one team in the MIAA?
I see how you angled that. That was interesting. Okay.
I got my Kobe Stevens jersey in the dry cleaners right now, so we'll break that one out. I might have to replace that Jet Huff one after this week, but they survived. They survived this thing. We're going to look at regional rankings later. They, because of the chaos, rose in the regional rankings from where they probably would have been.
Well, the good thing is the regional rankings don't care if you had a drama game. They just care if you win or lose.
Yep. It was not pretty. And like I said before, Mo West 3-6, but man, they have had some competitive games and they were playing hard. But yeah, this should not have been as scary as it was for Central Oklahoma. They seem to be struggling right now with getting up for games that they perceive beneath them. We saw it with the Northeastern State game, and then we saw it again with this game. Yeah, there are some questions, but when they're at their best, they're really good. But when they're at their worst, not so much.
Yeah, they haven't been at their best in
a little while. Yeah,
it feels like almost a month. But let's go ahead and take a look at this video. This is there's a lot to unpack here. So
let's go.
Early on, Jet Huff having a nice day at this point. Terrell Davis with the catch and the score. Right. He had 71 yards, 5 catches, and the score. Brandon Burwald here on the touchdown run, leading the conference in rushing yards amongst quarterbacks for those keeping track. Jet Huff with a run on in. He can scoot a little bit. No, he doesn't run that often. Normally just kind of move the chains type of running. 20-7 for a moment coming out of the water break, as we call it. They were away for 45 minutes, and Jet on this little bubble here, a little too much bubble on that. They're down 34-20 with 5 minutes left, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? Then Burwell rolls out and gets absolutely murdered on this play, but it was he fumbles in the process, and they lose getting the first down. Since he was a ball carrier, that's how that went. And we mentioned this guy a little bit earlier, Kobe Stevens. I was watching this live, and I was going, okay, he's going to be. Wait a second, no one's getting him, and I was like, oh my, this changes everything, John. And this was a wild game to watch live. And then they bring on in Dawson Hurl and he goes ahead and takes a nice shot right down the field there. And I was really impressed with the fact that they were able to get this tush push in there. With 13 seconds left, they go to overtime. Then Mr. Quevedo gets the kick for the game winner, and they end up somehow pulling this game out. And you know what I saw right at the end there? Doral was running out there not only with his chain, but he also had the towel going too. He had like the double thing going there.
You can't be not in that game. I'm guessing he sweat a little bit in that game because that was the game to sweat during. That's like I said before, you found a way to survive, but man, you'd like to see UCO put together a complete game again at some point here. Jet Huff coming out, whatever it is, injured, getting pulled, whatever it may be. Is not where you want to be right now. Terrell Davis is still really good, but 134 yards on the ground isn't what they're used to either. They struggled to get the running game going, and yeah, when that happens, you're gonna struggle. You got outrushed by Missouri Western. Is not ideal for that program right now. So yeah, it's
well. I think we have to then, okay, so you survive in advance here, right? And you're still doing pretty darn good in terms of your spot for the national tournament. We'll see that here in a minute.
Yep.
My question, though, is Jed Huff still the guy? And I'm asking this because if we take a look right now, his last 3 games, okay, Northeast, Oklahoma, Pitt, and this one, he has completed 50% of his passes. Before this, he was over 70% for the year. Okay, he's thrown 8 touchdowns, 5 picks in that time frame. Not to mention that pick 6, 270 yards a game instead of the whatever they were at before, which was much higher. Do you get the feeling that AD did this just because he thought they needed a lift here at the end, and Jet wasn't seeing things real good in this game, including that Pitt 6? Or do you think that this is a bigger thing?
I think if there is any injury issue right now with Jet Huff, then Dawson Hurl can win you football games with the teams they have left on their schedule. I think you need to get Jet Huff right if you are going to make a serious run at a national championship, which has to be the goal when you're as good as they are in Super Region 3. So I think in order to win those big games, you need Jet Huff. However that happens, you got to get him there. Whether he's just struggling and needs to play through it, then play him through it. But if he's nicked up, Dawson Hurl's been a starter in this league before and is a decent player with the weapons around him they have. So it all depends what's in that locker room right now and what the athletic trainers say, what's actually going on with Jet Huff. But in order to be a national championship top 10 type team in the country, they need the version of Jet Huff we saw earlier this year.
Agreed. Well, for what it's worth, when they did the coin flip for overtime, he came out as one of the captains, walked out there. I didn't see anything that looked wrong. To me, it almost came out like yeah, we need we just need to go ahead and win this ball game and whatever that's going to take. But you know what? We will find out soon enough. And this league is a whole lot more interesting right now. I'll be honest, when Jet Huff is doing his thing, and he's been a really, really exciting player for the first 2/3 of this season. So let's hope that continues going forward.
Absolutely.
Well, as we kind of take a look at some of the other games, the surprises didn't necessarily stop, in those previous graphics. We weren't shocked because both of us, for that matter, must be getting better at this than worse, because we both had Fort Hays winning this football game. But look at the total yardage, John.
It did not happen the way I thought it would happen. I thought this would be a Caleb Heavner game, and it was a Shane Watts game, and 300 and what is that, 31 rushing yards?
Well, Heavner, I think, had right around 100 himself running. So, yeah. I mean, he helped with the quarterback runs. But
rushing, yes.
I'm talking more about the other column. 138 total yards. I mean, this is like when Valdosta couldn't play in the rain against Lenore Ryan in the playoffs last year type of situation. That's how this felt.
Gunnar Gundy has torn up some teams, but he has also struggled against teams that have more of a defensive reputation in this league. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, they were playing through a downpour.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that I have a feeling that really affected them,
and they're
considering how frequently they pitch and catch.
Yeah, and they're not a running team, so that affects them more than Hays.
And at the same time, Hays' defense has been coming on.
Yeah, Hays is a good team. We thought before we knew about the weather, we thought Hays could win this game, and we both picked them to win this game. But
right,
and it's I didn't see 36-7 coming.
No. Now, if we were to do another version of your power rankings, maybe next week, hint, you would have a tough time doing your power rankings with some of the ups and downs late here that we've had in the last few weeks of the season.
I would guarantee that I'd get yelled at. That's the only guarantee.
Well, then we're doing this for darn sure. Then, if I can make sure you're going to get yelled at,
you'll probably be the one yelling at me.
Well, I that's nothing new. So, I'm extremely disappointed in this game. Okay, I'm not going to lie. This was 13-0 Ichabods, and I was already, I was counting my chickens before they hatched. I had the Ichabods in this one, and they found a way to not have any offense after that point. And, UNK goes ahead, ends up winning this one 14-13. 3 of 12 on third down for Washburn. That's going to normally tell a little bit of the story. Hey, look at Kearney. No penalties. What are we doing here? The refs threw 2 penalties the whole game.
Yeah.
Talk about letting them play.
This next game we're going to see there was a lot more penalties. I'll tell you that. I mean, going into the fourth quarter, down 13-0, UNK fights back. They've been fighting all year. It's impressive to see them do that. And Isaiah Harris is a guy we haven't talked about a lot on this show. He is a good running back. The University of Nebraska Lincoln transfer to UNK, and he's a workhorse. 35 carries for 147 yards in this one.
I saw that. 1
touchdown. He's a workhorse, and he's one of the better backs in this league that nobody really talks about too much because it's up there in Kearney, but he's doing good work.
And for me, that's down there in Kearney.
That's true.
But I understand your comment.
Yeah. Northernmost MIAA outpost out there.
Exactly. So now tell us a little bit here about Northwest. I saw that I was watching. I flipped it on for a little bit. I saw it was you guys were getting some rain also. Well, I say you guys, but this just felt like one of those games that Northwest just needed to win, and it wasn't necessarily going to be pretty.
Yeah, and it was not pretty. 21-13 at halftime.
Right.
It was a battle. Honestly, I listened to some of it on the radio. I was doing basketball /district cross country on Saturday, so I didn't get to watch it live. Obviously, I've been inundated with everything about it since. Yeah, they survived it. Northeastern's a lot better than they have been. That doesn't mean they're good by any means, like by Division II or certainly MIAA standards, but they have some athletes. At quarterback they have is a good football player. He ran for 72 yards and threw for 250 and 3 touchdowns. So he's a good player, but Chris Runke threw for 3 touchdowns as well. They got the running game going a little bit with 190 yards for Northwest. Yeah, they're playing well. They're obviously past the point of looking at playoffs or anything like that, but they're playing well lately, and they're still a tough team that's going to be an interesting matchup these last couple weeks.
Yeah, and they've got some interesting matchups for sure. Now, as we go ahead and we take a look at the league standings, Central Oklahoma is in a nice spot, right up at the top. Oh, I didn't realize that you were representing today, but just to make sure you're being full-blown fanboy, I did see that.
That towel hasn't left my desk since coming back from Edmond the other day, or like a couple weeks ago. So, yeah.
I gotcha.
That's probably just a sign I need to clean my desk.
Oh, maybe that too. But as we take a look through this, the teams that have 2 losses overall are basically the ones who are really in the hunt, seemingly, for the playoffs. Now, the teams who have 3 losses, as we've mentioned, if they win out, they might have a 20% chance. And you know what? If you got a chance to make it, of course. Now, as we move further down the page, I think Nebraska Kearney is the biggest thing that stands out to me. They're at 5-4 overall. This is marked improvement from a year ago.
If you had told me, considering Lincoln's out of the league now or not on anybody's schedule, that they would have a chance for a winning record this year, I wouldn't have believed you. That team's really shown some fight. Credit, we just talked about Isaiah Harris, but Reagan Jones going the whole year at quarterback didn't have the greatest game the other day, but Nebraska Kearney is a tough team. I give them credit because I was definitely a doubter on them before the season.
Yeah. Well, here is our new top 25 that came out today. And considering the fact that Harding, Grand Valley, and Pitt State have lost in consecutive weeks as the number 1 spot, Ferris State is on warning right now. But taking a look at the group here, we've got UCO hanging in at 7. Pitt State did not drop very far to 8. I'll be honest, I had them going down a little bit further than that. But at the same time, it's kind of this game, John, where, okay, they have 2 losses, play a very competitive schedule, and we know that they have a high ceiling, and they've shown that. But if I drop them further down, does that mean I would have Charleston beating them? And Augustana, Western Colorado, and Wichita, and Slippery Rock?
ASU.
I think that they win most of those games. And if that's the case, how far should I really drop them? You know what I mean by that?
I had them at 10. But
so did I.
I struggled with that. I had them because of those first 2 teams you mentioned. We talked before, I have a little bit of a cap of how high I put the Super Region 1 teams, and Kutztown is included in that. I do not have them at number 3. I have them at 8, and I've been pretty consistent keeping them at 8. And I dropped Pitt behind them and behind Charleston. And honestly, if those games happen, Pitt, I think, wins those handily. But it's that balance we talk about. Undefeated still means something. It's not standings, but it's close.
Right.
I have Augustana ahead of them. I have Augustana at 7 in my
I think Augie and Pitt would be a darn good game, actually.
Yeah, that's some tough teams there.
And Augustana, having played South Dakota State, who's got a tremendous defense, Augustana has played some good teams as well. But I mean, the next group, I think I would have, I think I would clearly have Pitt ahead of those guys. And so if that's the case, then, it is what it is. Now, as we go further down the page, Emporia State, I'd say they're hanging in there at 19, considering they have 2 losses. With a one-sided loss like they had to Fort Hays, I wasn't sure if they were even going to stay in the top 25, to be honest.
I'm honestly stunned that they are. I'm the MIAA guy. They were not in my top 25. I do not like the way they're playing right now. If we're judging this off of who would beat people, there are 2 teams that aren't in this poll that I would have above Emporia in my pecking order, and that includes UCM, which might be kind of shocking. But I have the bottom of my poll has Fort Hays and UCM at 23 and 24 because I think they're playing good football right now. I think I understand not wanting to put 3 lost teams in there, but when we're splitting hairs between Emporia State that's not playing very good football, it's 2 lost team, and those 2, I favor those 2.
John, you're letting your recency bias jump in here.
I know I am, but guess what? When we get into the playoffs, I care about how good of football you're playing right now.
I understand.
So, I understand it's a snapshot of the whole year, and with certain teams, that is the way it is. Those undefeated teams in the top 10, yeah, I'm putting that into. But as we get to the bottom of the poll, I'm kind of wanting to reward teams I think can make some noise here at the end. And
I understand.
Those are a couple I think could.
Well, let's go ahead, and they had a brand new release that's not even alphabetized. They actually put them in order this time, John.
Yeah, no.
I know, wild thought. So this came on out probably a few hours before you and I are filming here on Monday evening. And just before we take a look at the list, just for people who are brand new to this, or maybe some of these details are cloudy, the top 25 polls have no bearing on the numbers, the selection process, or anything like that. If we're going to be really honest, folks, the top 25 polls in Division II are for entertainment purposes and for sports information departments to kind of talk about their teams in a positive manner.
Well, certain sports information departments.
Yes. Let's not
get into that today.
See what happens when you don't publicize we have you number 1? No. You lose. No. Only the 2 games count. So, like, for example, we talked about Augustana a moment ago. They played South Dakota State early in the year. That has absolutely no bearing on anything with regards to the criteria and everything else.
The only MIAA example that applies, I think, is UCO and Langston. That game's not.
That sounds right. Yep.
That game is not included because that's an NIA. It doesn't matter if you're playing up or down. It's only
right. It's just only in your lane. Exactly. Margin of victory is not tracked. Now, this has got one small exception because we've got a brand new metric that we talked about and previewed earlier weeks ago called KPI. And KPI does have your margin of victory included in their little formula. So I'm going to show you an example of that when we get a little further along here, John. But lastly, the top 7 teams in each of the 4 regions will make the national tournament. So keep that in mind. We're talking about 28 teams total, and this is being sectioned off. So when you see the 10-team regional rankings, those are the 10 teams that they say are in the hunt, but the 7 are the ones who are going to, top 7 are going to be the ones who really make it. Now, the yellow area up above, we talked about before, the main measures that are used in this is your strength of schedule and your Division II winning percentage added together. And then also that orange area, kind of your results against better teams. How have you done? Who have you beaten? So let's go ahead and kind of move on into, this is our kind of colored up version of the regional rankings that were just released, 1 through 10, left-hand column. You can see the 1 through 10, and the silver 1 through 7 are the teams who theoretically are the top 7 right now, based on the regional committee that's made up of athletic directors and coaches who are on that together. So as we're taking a look here, John, we have, as we kind of figured, Ferris State and Grand Valley 1 and 2. They're kind of a clear-cut 1 and 2, if I'm going to be honest. Yeah. And Ferris State, since these two teams are right next to each other in the rankings, Ferris State gets the nod, despite Grand Valley having better numbers, because Ferris State beat them head-to-head.
We see that on the 3-4 line as well.
And the 5-6.
Yep.
So as you take a look at this here, the surprise of this really was Pitt State, we thought was going to be right around the 6 or 7 area. Well, that was because the number one biggest category that's used is win percentage plus strength of schedule, which is kind of in the middle of the page. Pitt State's not terribly favorable in that, if we look at that, which would indicate why they should be down the line a little further. However, the big thing that we see is that this KPI, this new measure towards the right side, which we have Pitt's highlighted in yellow, Pitt's very good in that category, which is, I actually like KPI. We're just now, since this is the first year for it, we're seeing it being applied, because if we're not, then Pitt State shouldn't be up that high. Yeah. And I have no problem with that at all, with them applying that, because I think that's a good measure. Now, that said, you may be thinking, okay, well, why isn't Harding then up higher themselves? Well, Harding does not have the same kind of strength of schedule, and they don't have as many wins over 500, and they don't really have a signature type win that you can hang your hat on. No. Pitt State's beaten the team right below them, Central Oklahoma, who we thought would be number 3. So naturally, Pitt gets the nod above them if we're going to look at Pitt in that positive light because of KPI.
And they've beaten the team at the top of the page.
Right. So all of a sudden, Pitt, I really think that this is kind of the unwritten thing, John, because in the criteria, there is not any spot there that says, how did you do against the other top teams listed on the page? There's nothing that says that. Yeah. But I can't blame the committee for looking at Pitt as if they're as high as 3, because they do have those kind of quality wins, John.
Yeah, I think we're talking about looking at numbers and what numbers matter. I think a little bit for the committee, it's what numbers can serve our purpose for what we see when we're looking at these games. The example we haven't gotten to yet is Indianapolis. They're at number 9. They would be in the field because of earned access, which is if you're in the top 9 in a conference that's not represented, you are in the field. So right now, Emporia State would be not in the field because UIndy would knock them out. But if you were to tell me that all these teams were playing each other in some kind of round robin, the other 11 teams on the page I would favor over UIndy in a game. Which is maybe too disrespectful, but that's how I feel about UIndy. And I feel like that's maybe how a few committee members feel about UIndy as well. So I think there's a little eye test going into this beyond the numbers, and you can look at the numbers to make it fit your eye test a little bit.
If you and I were going to speculate of what this room looks like in the committee, because what we're talking about here is each of the 4 conferences gets 2 representatives at the table. 1 coach, 1 athletic director. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be very candid about this. I think the GLVC has a hard time getting clout in that meeting. I really think because of how their teams have done in the past, which has not been favorable.
That's the important part.
And that's not a part of criteria, but I think that's I think that the least performing conference in terms of performing well in the playoffs, I don't think that they are able to negotiate or speak from a position of strength. And I think I think Indy, some of that's happening here. Indy probably statistically, if we take a look at the numbers, they should have been further up on the page, anywhere between 6 or 7. And they should have had enough separation that their loss to Saginaw Valley should not have been the thing that drops them down. They should have been up further, not far enough, but that wasn't the case. But as we take a look at this here, Indy, I think that the fact that their best win is against like a McKendree, I don't think that resonates in the room. I think when you talk about Pitt State beating Ferris and Central Oak, those type of things are listen up type of stuff. And that's, I think, some of what's happening here is when there's a discussion about the teams, moving away from the numbers, I think Indianapolis has a hard time keeping themselves in the upper portion of the conversation.
And I think if we look at this from, not to completely change the subject on that, but if we look at this from an MIAA point of view, what I see is no team is safe right now. I think if Pitt gets its third loss, you will see them plummet. And,
if we're looking weeks forward, there's tons of stuff here.
And Emporia and UCO remains a play-in game because Emporia has gotten themselves to that 7 spot still, despite the loss last week to Hayes. So that tells me if they can beat Central Oklahoma and they can beat UCM this weekend, they're going to be in, and it would be UCO that would lose that game that would likely fall out, because I think they would fall behind both those GAC teams as well, and then UIndy would probably get them on earned access. So I think that's how we're looking right now. It's a lot still up in the air for MIAA teams, and nobody should feel that safe with where they're sitting right now.
Well, and John, Emporia was another team that I was shocked to see this high. Not because they got blown out by Fort Hays, but if you take a look at their KPI, which is kind of the new item that could be influencing somebody who maybe shouldn't be as high, they're poor in that stat. If you can see that in the yellow on KPI to the right side. In the company they're keeping, Indianapolis is far better than they are. So is Saginaw Valley State, for that matter. And I think what's happening here is we're moving away from the numbers once again and saying, you know what, though? Emporia has beaten some teams. Emporia has beaten Pitt State. Emporia has beaten Angelo State, that is ranked in Super Region 4, number 5. Mm-hmm. So I think those type of things are entering the conversation. And I think that the numbers are being used, but I think there's also a conversation happening here and judgments being made. And if that's how it'll be, I'm good with it. That just means it's hard for us to handicap the field because we're not hearing the conversation. We're going off of the selection criteria.
Yeah, they're driving Inkblot and his numbers out of business is the problem with that.
Well, I chatted with Inkblot this afternoon. He and I will converse openly about this because he knows I look into the numbers. So does Chuck. And he and I were both having a hard time coming up with how's Emporia at 7 and how's Pitt at 3, unless we're going to start taking a look at those big wins. And neither one of us have any issue with that. It's just hard to know because that's not how the criteria is laid out.
The other MIAA factor is at the very bottom of the page for Fort Hays. And I think that, barring some craziness based on these rankings, I don't see them having – I see UCM as maybe having a better chance to jump in than Hays, just because if you look at their upcoming schedule, they have the bye, and then they have Nebraska Kearney. They're not going to make up a whole lot of ground in those 2 games. So I know there was some discussion on the Sunday show. You could see them maybe sneak into that 10 spot, and that didn't happen. So that tells me that those playoff hopes are really going to be hard to see at this point.
Well, this is one aspect I'm disappointed in the committee. They're inconsistent with how they've done this.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to give Emporia and Pitt State kudos for their big wins, why aren't you giving them to Fort Hays State?
Mm-hmm.
Because Fort Hays State is not getting any love for a win like Emporia then, and the way that they did it and so forth. Fort Hays State has been going on a run here. And if for us, because let's be honest, Henderson State hasn't beaten anybody. Southern Arkansas hasn't beaten anybody. So, and Fort Hays State's got a good KPI. Why wouldn't Fort Hays State be on that 10 line then? I think they missed the boat on that one. I flat out do. I don't even think that they were considered that much. And, I want to shine some light on that.
That's why I'm thinking UCM has more of an interesting case coming up since they do have that Emporia State game remaining. Mm-hmm. They've already beaten Pitt State. I think if they continue the year undefeated, I still think it's a major uphill battle. But I think they're going to be considered even more than Hayes, even though I believe Hayes beat them head-to-head.
Yes.
Because they just have – that Pitt State win is a difference maker. The committee clearly values Pitt State based on still having them as the number 3 team and having that respect that goes along with it. So
I don't think they can pass Fort Hays, though, because they're going to come up next to them and they're going to get the head-to-head loss. So
maybe.
But you know what? This is why I'm not, as you look more at this, I'm not completely ruling out a 3-loss team getting in. I'm just not. Because if we take a harder look at this on the far right-hand column of the orange, there's still some big games left to be played here for these squads. And like a Ferris State, for example, they have Saginaw Valley.
Congrats to Saginaw Valley, since Fort Hays is the new number 1 in the poll. You just picked up a program-defining win.
There you go. So, but for those who want a deep, nerdy dive into these numbers, I'm hoping we gave that to you here. Because I think a lot of our fan base who is watching a pod like this, they want to hear about this kind of stuff too.
This is what it all comes down to. Are you going to have a chance to dance?
And you know what? There's going to be people who will debate what you and I have to say in the comments or give pushback. I got to be honest with you. We don't have a dog in the fight.
No. So
we're calling it how we see it here. But
I would call it as I saw it, even if Northwest was in it, but they are nowhere near in it. So, yep.
And you weren't even pounding the drum for UCO in that segment. I just noticed that.
UCO is where I kind of think they deserve to be as number 4, but I'm a little surprised, I guess, that they're there actually. So I think 4 is the right spot. I think it's tiered correctly, the GLIAC, the MIAA, and the GAC. But I'm just kind of a little bit surprised to see it actually play out that way. I'm not surprised to see this play out this way, though.
I am. So you were 4-1 this last week. Only because Washburn didn't come through for me. Just want to point that out once again. I stuck my neck out, and that's what I got for that. Yeah, there you go.
Up or Lopes something. I forget. Yeah. One of them's UCM and one of them's Antelopes.
Yeah, well done. That was a good bit there. So you are 1 game now behind me in the pick'em. Who would have thought that we would be this close after all these weeks, or even that I'd be ahead for that matter? But you had that moment of Northwest foolery you were doing with Coach and all that stuff.
That 1-4 in week 3 is staring me in the face right now.
Yeah, a little bit.
That was not a great week.
Well, let's go ahead and
that's the important thing.
So, first off, bye week for Pitt and for Fort Hays State. And, real quickly, I've had a few different people who have reached out to me about Pitt State and is the 10 games they're going to play as opposed to 11. I've had a few folks who think that's going to hurt them. I think it actually helps them because instead of them having an additional win, I think that the ding and strength of schedule they would have gotten playing Northeastern Oklahoma, I think that ends up working to their benefit. What say you?
Well, their athletic director is on the committee, and I think he knows what the committee looks at, and I think that strength of schedule is going to matter, and there's a reason they did that. They didn't just want to play one less game. They did it because they know it's going to help them, and good for them. They're playing it correctly, and I think it would have been a road game for them, so they don't miss out on that home gate for Northeastern State. So I think that was a very smart move on their part, and Northwest did a very similar thing a couple years ago when they canceled the Lincoln game. So smart move by Pitt, I think.
Well, the word was that I had seen was they had a game lined up, So they got rid of that other game, the Northeast game. Then that game fell through. But I'm not sure once you get to that position, how motivated are you in finding a foe once you see the position you're going to be in. So I don't blame them at all. I mean, there's no fault in what they've done. There's nothing against the rules or anything like that either. So
Ferris had done several years before, but we always have that discussion with Ferris State.
Well, and you know what? I'm going to say this on behalf of both of those teams. It's not easy for either one of them to schedule people. People aren't trying to get a game with those teams.
Don't blame those schools either.
That's why they played each other. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So,
and I'm glad they did. But okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up Mr. Massey while we're at it. Central Oklahoma going to Washburn. We're not entirely sure what the quarterback situation is. We're thinking Jed Huff is they're going to get him back up on the horse here. Washburn, don't even talk to me after you let me down last week. So where are you going on this one, buddy? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a bounce back game for UCO. Obviously, a lot of speed on the field in this game, but as we say every week with Washburn, but I think UCO bounces back, gets a fairly comfortable win. Let's go 42-17 here.
Well, they are a 7-point favorite for Massey. Let's be honest, once again, Massey takes a 3-year window when they create their numbers and everything else. That's clearly coming into effect here because UCO had a losing record previously. Now, that said, I think Washburn's going to give them all they can handle in this one.
Ooh, upset special.
Now, they burned me last week, so I can't go quite that far. But I think UCO on the road can be a little bit sus at times. And so I'm going to take UCO to win, but I think this one might not be terribly pretty, but all they need to do is win. So you and I both have the Broncos there. How about Central Missouri and Emporia? Let's go ahead and let's move to our tail of the tape. Two teams with a somewhat similar identity. Not somewhat similar, pretty similar. John Dykstra, give me your thoughts on this one.
There are some numbers on this page that kind of surprised me as I was going through it. The rushing offense, UCM, we talked about earlier, they were downright terrible earlier this year in that category. And it's still only 119 yards a game, but man, that thing is shot up from where they were down below where Emporia is right now at 84 yards a game. So the fact that UCM has Zach Zabrowski and they have a better running game, that gives me a big lean towards that UCM offense. And you would say the defense kind of cancels that out, but they gave up in the rain knowing that Hayes had to run the ball. They got run all over last week. So I'm a little nervous of what Zabrowski can do to that defense. And that's kind of how I see it. Do you see it kind of similar?
I think Central Mo has got big time momentum going here.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to have recency bias, but I think that they win this. I think they win this game by multiple scores.
Yeah, I do too. I don't think multiple scores. I think Emporia is going to be able to put up points. I think the rainstorm, that was a little bit of a mirage. I think Gunnar Gundy's going to have windows to throw in this defense. I have 39-41.
And who do you have winning?
I have UCM winning.
I thought you were going with Emporia there.
Nope.
I'm taking UCM. Emporia absolutely has the ability to win this football game. I've just kind of lost some trust along the way. Too many close games, and then I just think that UCM is the team you don't want to play right now. And by the way, Massey has Emporia by 1.
We just discussed that UCM was down until last year, so that's a little long-term bias too. But I mean, they played better for the most part this year. But we just talked about when I talked about my top 25. I think UCM's a better team right now, and so I got to pick them in this one.
Fair enough. Northwest Missouri at Missouri Western. Is this the time where Dykstra tries to pull his upset special card, knowing he's down a game
I knew it
to the host?
I knew it was coming as I pull up the info here, but this is an intriguing game. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, two teams not playing for anything playoff wise.
As intriguing as that game can be, yes.
Yeah, it's a rivalry game, kind of.
I know.
Northwest has won 10 straight in the series. The all-time 24-4 is what the website says. There are more games than that going back historically. But Northwest has that. Last year, Western came in very, very high into that game and thought they were going to knock them off. And Northwest they got that win, and they kind of dominated that game, even though the score ended up being a little closer. I think Northwest has enough to pull this off, but I wouldn't be shocked if Western did get really up for this game and find a way to do it. Brandon Burwell's given them a different aspect, an aspect that Northwest struggles with, the running quarterback. And he's a little bit more of that Minnesota State Mankato, Hayden Eckert style of design runs too, which is they give them more trouble. But I think Northwest pulls this thing out. I am going 32-24.
Well, you know what? So I was kind of split on this game.
Oh, you're going to go the other way.
And you know what? I don't want us to. If you just gave me motivation for us not to pick the same four teams,
Yeah.
so I'm going to take Missouri Western. Now, my concern is how was their heads after blowing that game they did a week ago, a few days ago.
To be fair, they're used to it. They have blown several close games this year.
But they're going to be at home. They definitely do some things that are going to give Northwest some troubles. Northwest still always concerns me with, the high risk reward that their offense has become with the passing game and turnovers. But I'm going to go out and take Western here to win a close game. Let's go 38-35.
I could see it happening. Yeah. I'm not off that possibility at all.
Okay, and the last game, Kearney, Missouri Southern. I think I know where you're going on this, but I'm listening.
I'm a big Atiba Bradley guy. Don't forget. But no, beginning of the year I would have had Southern. Kearney is really impressive. I've completely 180 flipped where I'm giving them the benefit of the doubts in games that I think are 50-50. I just think Kearney's going to find a way at this point. And I don't think this one's really 50-50. 27-13, 2 touchdowns. I think Southern's can hang in there a little bit, especially at home. But I think Kearney ends up being too much and too physical.
Well, Massey has Kearney as a 12-point favorite. I think that's about right. I think I'm right in the same boat with you across the board on that. I got Kearney winning by a few scores. I don't think that they're going to put up a huge number, but I think that they'll be comfortable.
So I don't think I'm allowed to say go Bearcats because of the media thing. But I've said go Lopers and go Bronchos in the past. So,
well, I've put you in that position where that's going to catch you up. So I understand it.
Be rooting for him. So, oh man,
yeah, there we are. But
I'll be at state cross country this weekend anyway. We'll have coverage. The boss man, Ken Gardner, our publisher's headed down to that game. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah, they'll have a professional journalist there.
Enjoy state cross country.
I will. Bradley Deering going to win state title.
Yeah, keep it out. Yep. So for those 5 people who care about that, I just completely, I got all the cross country. Bring all your venom. I don't care.
They're like wrestling, folks. You
no
cross country. No. You are into cross country. Anyway, let's get to the mailbag.
So the mailbag. Let's see. We have 5 questions for our expert. That's you, by the way.
I'm getting for it.
You're here for it. Okay. Top scoring defense in the MIAA. Hey, I need to see your hands. You're trying to do some foolery here.
Top scoring defense in the MIAA. There's 2 that come to mind. They're both in the state of Kansas. And I am going to say that the top scoring defense in the MIAA resides in Hayes, America.
Correct.
One for
They're at the top of that list. They are number 1.
Is Pitt number 2? That was the one I was debating.
I think they are, and
Okay,
Northwest Missouri State's number 1 in yards per game, but they're middle of the pack in points per game, which tells you that they're giving up points despite the fact they're not giving up as many yards.
It tells you the turnover margin is probably pretty bad, which it is.
That too, yeah. Okay, so you're off to a good start, 1 for 1.
Okay.
What position player, meaning non-quarterback, has scored the most touchdowns in the league this year?
I am going to say that player, God, he had none this week, so that makes me a little nervous about him. Give me Tyler Common.
Shane Watts, 16.
Dang. Caught him this week. Common would have been it last week, but that's what it does when old Shane does what he did.
Yeah, monster week. So you're got 1 right, 1 wrong. Who are in terms of receptions?
Okay, there's 2 of them.
Name the top 3 in receptions in the MIAA.
Terrell Davis, Tyler Common. There's a reason you went for 3. So I get a point for each of those, and then when I screw this last one,
not really how this is an all or nothing.
Oh man, that's not fair. Wow, I'm really blanking on who the reception could be.
I'll give you a moment to think here. I'm not rushing you.
I'm gonna say I think I might know. It's an interesting one. Jonas Bennett.
Trendon Collins, Emporia State.
Doubled up on the Emporia guys. I thought Bennett would have been a good answer. I bet he's right there. But
so you now have still 1 right, but 2 wrong. How about
I got 2 out of 3 on that one.
Same question, rushing yards.
Top 3?
Mm-hmm.
Quarterbacks are included?
Whatever you want.
Okay. Top 3 in rushing yards. Jalen Cottrell.
Yep. He's number 2.
I think. He's number 2?
By a distance, he's number 2.
Who am I forgetting? Shane Watts?
Shane Watts is the only guy in the conference with over 1,000 yards.
Wow. Shane Watts, good for you. It's not a Pitt guy. It's not a Northwest guy. It's definitely not a UCM guy or an Emporia guy. Going through. I want to say this name, but I think I'm going to do it. Yep. Isaiah Harris.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
When you were saying his name earlier, I was doing my best.
Oh, you were worried.
I was doing my best not to give away anything there. So 2 right, 2 wrong for our expert.
That one, 2 for 3. I should have like 8 right and 1 wrong at this point.
Not really, because some of those were gimmies, and we both know that. Okay.
We do. You could have just said who was 3rd in the league in receptions, but yeah. Anyway, moving on.
This is the 5th and final question. We're going to see if you pass or fail the mailbag this week. Who's leading the conference in tackles for loss?
Tackles for a loss. I know a certain Bearcat had a big game this week in tackles for loss, but I don't think it's him. Q Felton, UNK.
He still is, has been almost the entire year, and sacks too.
Victory.
Exactly. It's the
Felton.
small victories.
Man, my UNK knowledge, my UNK love is really paying off with both.
No, he's your default answer. I thought you wouldn't go with your default answer because you'd overthink it. Somehow you didn't, though.
There were a couple guys that came to mind, and a couple guys from Hayes, Northwest. Jake Fisher just had a big game, but no,
he's up there in the standings. I saw it. Yep, yeah. I noticed that. But well, we're going to go ahead and kind of move into our wrap up here. We want to mention for the folks in the Kansas City area, our guy Brandon Meisner, and you see that on John's shirt there. He got a chance to, he had a stroke. For those who have been, keeping track, our founder, Brandon, has not been in on any of our stuff this fall. He's kind of battling as much as he can to return to our broadcasts and everything that goes with that and the website. But Brandon got a chance to go to his second football game. And, great deal there. St. Pius, their first round playoff game, they won big. I want to say 61-7 or something like that. They have a tougher game upcoming this week, John. I forget who they're playing.
Let me get you that info, but you just keep.
I'll keep rolling. Okay, so they're on the right side. Brand's getting a chance to kind of watch the post game huddle. Then, as you go ahead and you look on the left side, that is Noah Eblin, who his father, Bob Eblin, was our longtime national writer, best friends with Brandon. So pretty awesome deal for Brandon to go ahead and get a chance to get out of the compound and get out of the rehab and everything else and go ahead and have some time there. That's really an awesome thing. So, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he may even try and go to another game this coming week. And John, do you know who they're playing there?
They play Fort Osage this week. It's a pretty good football program, 7-3 on the season. But Pius has won 9 straight. They're looking pretty good. If they can beat Fort Osage, I believe they would have Platte County in the next round, who is
that's what I heard too.
An undefeated number 1 team in the state. So that would be a big time matchup. But Pius has a beautiful high school setup there with that pavilion. You can't really see it because Brandon's sitting in it, but it's a nice, accessible area for somebody to watch a game at.
And St. Pius kind of went out of their way and let him go up there and the whole deal, and just kind of a neat deal all the way around for our guys. So for all of our longtime fans who know our guy Brandon, this is kind of our way of keeping up with folks on all this stuff. There's been a lot of folks who have bought things with the fundraiser or the GoFundMe stuff. It's great for everybody to get a chance to kind of see how things are going with them. So
Tony Simone is the head coach at Pius. Just for people to know, people in the Kansas City area are going to know that name. The Simones are big time football name in that area. So first class gesture.
So as we go to our final graphic, we've got our appreciation graphic. The Mules and Jenny's UCM media department, we went ahead and got that interview that they had. And then our guy John Dales, who's always coming through for us at KOAM.
Go to win or loss, he'll get us something. So
I was just gonna say we're gonna owe him a meal or something after this, I think, or you will for that matter.
Maybe,
But MIAA Network's always got good stuff for us. And, for those who are looking for John's work, John does stuff not only for the local, Maryville coverage, but also, you go ahead and you speak plenty about MIAA stuff. So for those interested, you can have his info up there, bottom right of the screen. I've been kind of just been moving around as helping host the MIAA, Northern Sun, and the GLIAC, along with being on our national show. So if you want to follow me at all, obviously my info is right there. But, very busy weekend we just had, John. And, this coming week, probably not quite as noisy, but we don't know just yet. So, we'll go ahead and see. But each week as we move forward, we only have 2 weeks left in this regular season, my friend. So
as we churn towards playoff time too, I'd encourage people to, I think most people watching this probably watch the Sunday show, but you're going to get a more national look at the playoffs through that. And I always find that really helpful each week. And GLIAC Weekly is another thing that you are sometimes helping produce. And,
yep.
and Tony over there. And the GLIAC matters a lot in Super Region 3. So I'd encourage anybody maybe start tuning in there and get a opposing sideline view of some of those teams you might see down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Now for full disclosure, that will be shot later this week. Our guy Tony is out of town for a while, so don't be looking at that for any before Friday. So I just figured I'd put that out from a programming standpoint. But thank you for everyone who tunes on in. And once again, we will see you at the games.